G'day, welcome back to the channel, and today I want to talk about these lithium ion cells. Now these are 18650 lithium ion cells. They come in a range of flavors and sizes and all sorts of things, but these are the most common ones, and they've really changed the face of the world recently because they store so much energy in such a small space, such a small volume. And we're starting to use these for models now. I have a 4-cell pack that I made for myself, put it on my 5-inch quad. I'm getting 21 minutes of flight time out of a quad that normally gets 5 or 6 minutes with a 1500 milliampere hour lithium polymer battery. Fantastic. I could turn my freestyle quad into a long-range cruiser just by changing the battery type. So yeah, these batteries are pretty cool, but I'm not reviewing batteries today. No, I'm not, because I'm going to, well, I suppose I am in a way. I mean, imagine this. Imagine if you could take one of these batteries and make it fly. And not an airplane, but just put some motors on it and a flight controller and make it fly. Wouldn't that be so damn cool? Well, guess what? Someone's done it. Look at this. This is the HGLRC Rekon 3 or Recon 3 or whatever you want to call it. And it's based on the work done by a guy called Dave C on his YouTube channel, and I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. Basically what it is a flying 18650 cell. You whack your 18650 cell in there, bingo, it becomes a quadcopter. And they call it a long-range quadcopter, but I'm not so sure. I think long range is just a trendy word to use when you're trying to flog a new bit of kit. But there you go, it is a flying 18650 cell, and to prove that point, I'm going to get my scales out. The scales that do not show the blood. We're going to look at just how much of this is actually battery. So let's turn on the scales that don't show the blood. Let's have a look at the quad itself. It weighs in at a grand total of 66 grams with a crossfire receiver in there already, or 67. It put on some weight. Hey, it's winter down here. Everyone puts on weight during the winter. There it is, 67 grams. And let's compare that to the weight of the battery. Now the battery itself is 46 grams, 45 grams. So it's almost as heavy as the battery it carries. And if we put them both together, we get an all-up flying weight of 113, 114 grams. It's pretty light. Now, of course, that's a Sony cell. It's the VTC4, because I couldn't get any VTC6s, which is what they recommend for this. But I do have the LG, what are they? The HG2, which I've been using on all my other quads. What does it weigh with one of those? Yeah, the same. So these cells weigh the same. So we've got basically a quadcopter that is mainly all flying battery. Now in here there's some really cool groovy stuff. Let's get rid of the blood. Some cool groovy stuff. We've got 4 motors. These are, if I look at the size of them, what does it say on them? It says they are, hang on, I have to hold them up, 1202.5. 1202.5. So that's what they are. Very small motors, obviously, because this is a very small, very lightweight quad, and tiny little propellers. Looks tiny little propellers. It has a CADX camera in the front. The camera's okay. It's not that flash. I'm actually thinking of replacing it with a run cam to get a comparison, get a difference, because I'm reviewing this as a product. Now, you can go to the HGLRC website and buy this now. Should you buy this now? Well, you'll be able to make your mind up when you've watched the rest of the video. But I think this is, rather than being a finished product, this is actually a starting point, because I don't think Dave C has completely finished the development of this particular device, this particular craft. And I think there's a lot more work could be done on it. Now, I've looked at a couple of reviews already. I didn't want to be first out of the box because I lost my flight footage. I have to do it again, but never mind. And I see that Andy RC, well, he broke his, and he's not that impressed with it, I don't think, in many ways, because it flies, but it's not a freestyle quad, and it's not a long-range quad, because you're only running 350 milliwatts maximum of RF on there, and it hasn't got a circularly polarized antenna. We'll talk about that later. So Andy wasn't as impressed, I think, as he could be. Painless 360, on the other hand, he seemed to really, really like it. He really enjoyed it. And I'm somewhere in the middle. Now, I think it's got great potential. I've probably put 3 batteries through it now, and I'm not getting the flight times that Andy and Painless are getting, but then again, I don't have these, what is it, the CT6 or whatever they are batteries. I only have the 4s, the VTC4 and the LG HG2. So they're probably not quite as good as the Sony packs, but I'm getting 11 to 12 minutes, which is okay. But this is a starting point, as I say, because there are still some things that could be greatly improved on this craft, in my humble opinion. A few things I've noticed: it doesn't have a beeper. It doesn't have a beeper. Why? It's so small and easy to lose that you'd be silly not to have a beeper on this thing. If you fly this over long grass and it crashes or lands any distance away from you, you will never find it. It disappears into the grass. The least you need is a beeper. 3 or 4 grams, maybe 2 grams for a beeper. Surely that's an essential, not a luxury, not an option, but an essential thing for something this small that you're supposedly going to be flying a little way away from yourself. That would be quite handy. There was something else, I made a note and I've forgotten it. I'll bring it up later in the video. Don't worry about it. And so I think the biggest problem I've encountered with this thing is that it does brown out. I mean, these cells have fantastic capacity, 3,000 milliampere hours in that cell, 3,000 milliampere hours, but unfortunately, a great deal of that capacity is at very, very low voltages compared to LiPos. Now, your average LiPo, by the time it gets to 3.3 volts, it's flat. There's virtually nothing left in it. When these are at 3.3 volts, they've still got a lot more to give. So although it may be a 3,000 milliamp battery, it's only going to be about 2,000 if you have to start landing because if you are flying this around, the video transmitter may stop working. It has happened to me on every one of my last flights on a battery. When it gets down to about just under 3 volts, then you have to be very judicious with use of the throttle. And even a slight bump in the throttle can cause the video to brown out. I don't know if it's the camera. I think it's the camera because there still seems to be a carrier but no video on top of the carrier. And when that happens, well, you're blind. And because it's so small, even if it's just a couple of 100 meters away, you won't see it. So you've just got to basically cut it and let it fall to the ground. In Andy's case, that resulted in one of these carbon fiber arms breaking because they're very, very light. So yeah, there's a bit of work to be done now. Notice that Dave C used a little boost voltage converter in his one. I didn't see any sign of that in this one. This seems to be running solely on the battery voltage. So they're not boosting up the battery voltage to higher levels to reduce the risk of brownout on the video gear, which I think is a mistake. Now, those little up boost converters are very noisy. You've got to put filtering in as well, and it all adds to weight. So, you know, these things become bricks 1 gram at a time. So you've got to decide somewhere what you're going to include and what you're not going to include. And I guess HGLRC have made the decision that, well, fly it to 3 volts and then, you know, land. And that's one way to look at it. But I have to say that, again, if you've got to land at 3 volts, it, again, reduces the long range ability. I would not want to be flying this any distance away if I knew that it was going to brown out and I'd have to fall out of the sky at any moment, because you will not find it. You will not find it if it's that far away. Unfortunately, that's just the way things go. Now, as I mentioned, it does have a linearly polarized antenna. It's got a sleeve dipole here at the back. And that causes me problems here at the airfield because there's a lot of reflective surfaces. I have the hangars, so I get a lot of multipathing. And of course, linearly polarized antennas do not work well in a multipathing environment. So it doesn't give me a very good video signal. Another thing I notice is as you're getting down on battery voltage, the video gets noisier and noisier and noisier because there is less headroom for the regulators to take out the noise. So you get more noise coming through on the video signal, you get lines on your picture. You'll see in the flight video, it's really it distracts from the whole what you're trying to achieve, which is a lovely long distance scenic cruising flight. But for what it is really cool. It is a flying 18650, and it's proof of concept. It proves you can fly an 18650 battery, and it can be done. But the question you've got to ask is that a good idea? Why would you do that? Because compared to this, I've got things like the Tiny Hawk Freestyle 2, which is 85 grams, I think, with battery. And it is much more fun. I can do flips and rolls and freestyle it and fling it around. And sure, I only get maybe 4 or 5 minutes out of a battery. But those 4 or 5 minutes are unbridled joy, absolute fun. I can't freestyle this to any degree because it just doesn't have the power. If you punch on this, well, you don't really notice it. And if you punch when your battery's down to around 3 volts, the lights go out. So they did say to change the startup torque of the motors, you know, the BL Heli setting, to reduce the rate at which the motors spool up and therefore reduce the drain on the battery. But that makes it even harder to fly when you've got so little power in reserve anyway. So there's big trade-offs there. I think you really have to decide what you want to do. But this is perfect. If you wanted to build one of the Dave C flying 18650 quads, this gives you everything, almost everything you need to get started. So it's a starting point. And from here, you can do your own work on this. What I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to change the camera because I don't much like the Caddx one. I'm going to put in a boost converter to try and give me more reliable and cleaner video feed, which will be interesting. And then I've got a few other ideas I'm going to try out, a few other bits and pieces which change the tune a little bit. So I'm going to try and turn this into what I think it could be rather than what it is at the moment. Now, Dave's done a wonderful job bringing it up to this point, but it's certainly not finished in terms of development. There's so much more we could do to this. Also, I want to put a circularly polarized antenna on here so that I can fly in highly multi-pathing environments, because if you're going to use it for exploring, that's where you're going to fly it. And I am going to put a beeper on it. Absolutely no doubt about that. It does need a beeper. So there you go. That's the bench look at this thing. It is so cute. It is so cuddly. You know, there's not much not to like about it. So yeah, let's go out and fly it. I'll give you some flight footage. It's a murky, horrible grey day, probably raining at the moment. I'll do my best. We're not going to get a 15-minute flight, which is the claim flight, because these batteries don't seem to deliver that. But you will see some of the elements that I've noticed before in flights, and I'll narrate you through that flight. I may fast forward through some bits because you don't want to sit here for 11 minutes watching me tool around at very low speeds. And there's a lot of wind today too, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge for this thing. Anyway, there we go. Let's cut to the flight footage now. The battery voltage, 4.08 volts. Now this is a fully charged batteries, but LiPo, lithium ion, as soon as you put them on, they drop. And once we take off here, see how it's dropped right down to 3.8 volts straight on the get-go. That's because lithium ions have a higher internal resistance, and unlike LiPos, which will hang around above 4 volts for quite a while, lithium ions don't do that. They drop straight down. Of course, they'll sit around the 3.7 to 3.2 volt range for quite a long time, as you'll see during this flight. Now, as you can see, the weather's bad. It's very, very windy. Heading out, and you'll see there is already some sort of horizontal banding, some horizontal sort of changes in intensity of the signal there. That is basically noise from the motors and the ESCs getting into the video feed. You get that. Now the larger flickering, that's multi-pathing or just small signal dropouts. There was driver training at the airfield today, so I thought, yeah, we'll go and have a look. So this is about 400 meters away from where I'm standing, and that's perfectly good video reception. No problems at all. I went a bit further down. In fact, I have in the past flown right down here, probably 700-800 meters, and the video holds up just fine. And I'm not really being too careful about where I point my helical antenna, so this is probably running as much on the Omni as the helical at the moment. So yeah, the video transmitter is great. It's got plenty of power. But as you'll see when we go back, that multi-pathing thing, yeah, that's a bit of an issue. So here we are, probably out now over 500 meters, maybe 600 meters from where I'm standing with my Skyzone 4s on top of my head. And I think I turn around eventually because there's really not a lot to see out here. Notice the voltage down to 3.5 now. So the voltage is dropping. And notice also I'm using 41-42% throttle. That's about what you fly at. That more throttle doesn't really do much on this quad because the battery voltage is so low. And here we go, we come back. Notice it's much faster coming back. That's because of that wind, and you'll see later just how strong the wind is. It was really quite a strong wind, probably about 15k. And so you end up with a bit of wind behind it. It gets a bit of speed up. Now notice as we go through here, the signal is going to break up quite a bit because of the multi-pathing from these hangers that are on your right there. They're metal objects that act like reflectors. The signal bounces off them, bounces back. See, there's a bit of multi-pathing, but more there. And we'll have a look over here. It probably just depends. The slower you fly, the more you notice the multi-pathing because it takes longer to move in and out of the troughs and peaks of the signal that multi-pathing produces. But I mean, the camera's okay. You see it's got good dynamic range and so forth, but unfortunately I have to operate with the RapidMix turned off on my, there we go, there's a good multi-pathing. The RapidMix is turned off on my Skyzone, so it's not as good as it should be. And again, we'll move along here. The hangers are directly across from us, so there will be more multi-pathing. That noise that you see there, I noticed some of the other reviewers didn't seem to have that noise on theirs. It may be a factor of the batteries I'm using. As I said, the LG batteries are a slightly higher internal resistance, not quite as good as the Sanyo ones, so who knows. And now, basically, I just flew up and down, flew around, just did a bit of, tried to use up some batteries. What are you up to now? We've got on time of 3 minutes 38, so we've been flying probably for a couple of minutes. And one thing I noticed is there's no current shunt or no current sensor on the all-in-one board. It uses the Zeus all-in-one. There's no current sensor on that, which is a bit of a shame because it would be nice to have some kind of indicator of how many milliamps you've used, although, to be fair, if you're only able to take this down to 3 volts or so, you're not going to get the full capacity of the battery anyway, so that, maybe it's not really worth having. Who knows? But obviously the RSSI works pretty well. We're running Crossfire at the moment. Those are pretty low numbers actually for Crossfire, but hey-ho, it's probably because it has a horizontally oriented antenna on the quad. To get a Crossfire antenna on there, you've got to relay them horizontal, which gives you cross-polarization losses. If you've got your transmitter antenna vertical, there's lots of different things. But again, we're seeing a bit of multi-pathing as we move along there. But overall, fly around here. What are we up to now? Over 3 minutes, if we take the minute on the ground out of the equation. And Yeah, I think I'll fast forward here because you're just going to get bored with me talking and trying to pad things out for the full length of the flight. Let's do some fast forward. So there we go. You'll have noticed in that little segment how the windsock was out at quite an angle. There was a lot of wind. And now we're down to 3.15. We're at 3.2 volts, and we've been flying for almost 9 minutes. We started at the 30-second mark, so that's not a bad flight time, not a bad flight time at all. So as I say, I get about 11, 12 minutes out of these batteries, which is, yeah, I'm kind of happy with that. And it's even in these strong winds with turbulence behind the hangars here, it's easy to fly. It's very stable. The tune on this is not too bad. Andy RC said he wasn't too pleased with the tune, but I haven't found it too bad at all. So that was a flight. That was a flight with the Recon 3 from HGLRC. Okay, so there we go. That was a reasonable flight. It was very windy, as you could see, and still we had battery left after over 8 minutes of flight time. So yeah, as I say, for me, about 11 minutes seems to be about right with one of these HG2 cells from LG. And I remembered what I was going to say before. I use the Skyzone 04Xs, my daily drive, the best goggles I have, fantastic OLED analog goggles. Used my homemade helical, so I get a long way. I've actually flown this thing, what would it be? Probably close enough to 1,000 meters in a straight line. And perfect video. I've got the video transmitter running at 350 milliwatts. You can, of course, step it through from 25 to up to 350, depending on how much power you need. I would recommend don't run any more power than you have to, because it's all sucking valuable energy out of this tiny battery. So the less draw, the longer you last. And it's quite a good video transmitter. It puts out a really good signal, but you notice the multi-pathing, that was quite obvious. And you can use circularly polarized antennas like these with a linearly polarized transmitter antenna. You'll lose 3 decibels or so. It's nothing to worry about. You don't get any of the benefits of cross-polarization or the circular polarized antennas if you're using a linear on the transmitter though. So I'd like to see that change to a circularly polarized. You use one of these little, I've got some somewhere and I've lost them all. I lose everything in this place. Oh, here we go. One of these would be ideal. Where are we, if I can find it? One of these little lollipop things here. That would be very little heavier than that, and it would be fantastic if they put a right angle, put that up there. I might do that. It's going to be one of the changes I'm going to make, is put a circularly polarized antenna on there for much better operation in front of reflective surfaces like the hangars here at the airfield. As I was saying, I do use the Skyzone goggles. It's the video camera and video transmitter, or one of the two, is not compatible with RapidMix. That's the Skyzone version of Rapid Fire. So if I run it with RapidMix, it goes all dark and rolls and looks horrible, and I can't fly the thing. So I have to use regular diversity. That's another reason why I'm going to be changing the camera in here to a run cam, because I've had pretty good luck with run cam cameras and the RapidMix on the Skyzone. So I'm going to change it to a run cam. I've got a run cam nano, which I will throw in there, and we'll see how that performs comparatively, because you'll have noticed there are a lot of lines in the image, especially as the battery started getting down, it's a lot of noise in that image. I think having the RapidMix may reduce some of that, may give me a better result on the goggles, which would be fantastic. So there you go. That is it. That is what I discovered playing with this little flying 18650 cell. And I would say, if you want to have a go at this, because it's something new, it's something different, it's something, bit of a challenge, then I think these are, I don't know what, they're $100 and something. You'd have to decide for yourself whether it's good value for money. Considering you're getting everything you need to start. You can take it out and fly it like it is. You saw I flew that. Strong winds, no worries. It handles the wind like most quads really well, because the disc loading is reasonably high. and so it wasn't affected very much by the wind. For something that size, it's brilliant. You couldn't have flown a Baby Hawk or something out there that got blown away. So yeah, it's a good place to start. HGLRC are actually one of my favourite quad companies. I've got this Sector 132, which is one of my favourite little drones. I fly that an awful lot. It did need some tuning out of the box, but once I tuned it up, it is just a brilliant. I get 8 minutes out of that damn thing with some 650 milliamp 4-cell packs. I love the HGLC stuff. Just to show you, here we go. Here's the box. This is what it looks like. There's a dinosaur. I have no idea why there's a dinosaur, but it's holographic. Fantastic. Look at the colours on that. Yeah, so thank you HGLRC for sending that. They did send this full review. It is a pre-release sample, so I did mention to them, they put some stuff in there like the little card that tells you which way the props goes was wrong, and I suggested it might be a good idea to put a buzzer on here so you can find the damn thing if you lose it in the long grass, and maybe even a little label on the box to say this is a choking hazard. Who knows, because it's so small. But yeah, it's good. I will continue to fly this thing, but I won't be flying it over hard surfaces at low batteries, because as you saw, Andy RC, his fell onto grass and broke these spindly little carbon arms. So just be careful where you fly it. And once you get down to 3.2 volts or so, treat it very, very gently on the throttle and stay away from hard surfaces and stay low. That's what I'd say. But it's a starting point. Just, if you want to see what I'm going to do with this, then make sure you subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to be using this as a basis for my own experimentation with these things. But I'm also going to do a test, because I think that if you stuck in a 1,000 or a 1,500 milliamp single cell LiPo, not lithium ion, but LiPo, this would fly much better. It would fly heaps better. I mean, it is a great thing to fly one of these cells, but I think a lithium polymer is much more sensible for 1S operation, because, as I say, when it's flat, well, it goes right down to 3.3 volts, and then it's flat. These, if you want to get the full power, you've got to get into 2.5, and the quad will have stopped flying long before you get there. So you're going to get all the energy out of a LiPo that you won't get out of a lithium ion, and you'll have a lower internal resistance, so you'll be able to do some punchy stuff and you won't get so much noise on the video. I'm going to throw in some lithium polymers on this, try it out with a single cell lithium polymer, and just do the comparison, because I think it may be a much better craft with a lithium polymer. Don't use lithium ions just because they're there. You know, use the best tool for the job, and I think in this case, lithium polymer may be the way to go. Let's find out. Stay tuned, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Thanks to my Patreon supporters. You make it possible for me to make these videos and provide you with this information. That's it. I'll put a link to the HGLRC website. It's not an affiliate link. I don't make a bean if you buy this, or if you don't buy it, I don't care. I'm only here to provide you with information, not to shill for products. But there you go. That is it. The HGLRC Recon 3. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.